First up, I'd like to welcome to the screens Dr. Hussein Badran, who will be presenting Internet Evolution Approaches at ITUT, Why Should We Care? Hussein holds the position of Regional Technical Advisor, North America Bureau with the Internet Society, and he's based in Ottawa, Canada. This is Hussein's second time presenting at NANOG, and it's a pleasure again to have him speaking with us today. Welcome, Hussein.
The aim of the topic of this talk here today is really to provide an insight into discussions that are happening at the ITUT that look at internet evolution approaches, and they can have significant impact on how the internet will evolve in the near to distant future. So awareness of these and participating, being active in these discussions is quite critical. So the talk today is composed of just looking at one of the key critical proposal at the ITUT being discussed over the last several months, finding some insight into the new IP proposal, what are the key concerns the Internet Society and other stakeholders have seen into such proposals, and then how this is being evolved to our date today. And then looking into some positive and effective and successful evolution of the internet, particularly on vertical and specialized networks, and reflecting on some very recent developments just 2 days ago regarding the similar new IP proposals. So some of the acronyms I'll be using in today's presentation relate to the ITUT. ITUT is a specialized agency of the United Nations. It's short for International Telecommunications Union, Telecommunication Standardization Sector. That has several study groups that look into developing new standards, study group 13 for future networks, 11 for signaling and requirements. And then there is an overarching body, TSAG, Telecommunication Standardization Advisory Group, looks into the logistics and the operation and approving these the questions being studied at the study groups. WTSA is really the World Telecommunication Standardization Assembly, where really the governments of the world get together every 4 years to agree on priorities of standardizations for the next study period. Standards Development Organizations, SDOs, and ETSI is the European Telecommunication Standards Institute. The new IP proposal is something that has appeared in the ITU as early as 2018. Through a focus group that was created to discuss the future of the internet and how the internet would look like in the year 2030. This was done through a contribution to TSAG in 2019, and then proposals started to emerge into direction of the future is this new IP proposal. In 2020, the terminology was changed to future vertical communication networks, but really the substance of the proposal has been kept intact. Another key step is after significant opposition from many governments and civil society members and other stakeholders, it was decided at the ITU Study Group 1311 not to accept the new IP-related questions as new work items for new standards, as well as stop discussing new IP, at least until WTSA, which took place in March 2022. So that was a decision taken in December 2020. But as we will see, really proposals very similar to new IP, with the elements of new IP, kept on coming to the ITUT, looking for standards development in the same framework. And these proposals actually have appeared as from March 2021 under polymorphic networking, as well as immersive real-time communication systems, that we will look into a summary of these proposals. And that's also not only in the study group 13 and 11, but also in study group 17, which deals with security aspects of the of networks, security guidelines for deterministic communication services, for IMT 2020 networks and beyond. So it is very critical to keep really engaged and aware and vigilant to these proposals and collaborating among the multiple stakeholders that can be engaged in such activities. So the work focus group on Network 2030 came up with some technical reports and a gap analysis, as shown here in the year June 2020. But the key observations of this work is that the gap analysis were very high level. Gap analysis here looks into what the IT2T should be doing versus what other standards organizations are currently doing, like 3GPP or the IETF or IEEE. So the gap analysis performed by the team here at the focus group was very high level, quite superficial, and no formal engagements through liaisons between the ITU and these other organizations took place, which means that there was no formal discussion of the proposals. As an overview, quick overview of the new IP proposal presented to ITUT during 2019 and 2020. Basically, it is a proposal from Huawei to develop new network protocols and architectures by extending and redesigning the traditional IP, supporting new services for a new internet by 2030. So the objective is not hidden, is not being hidden. It is a new network architecture, redesigned traditional IP, and the new internet. And there are elements of this that will cover two of them: semantic addressing, as well as deterministic services and intrinsic security. As we see from the graph here, new IP on one side versus traditional IP on the other side, so a complete replacement was really the desire. The multi-semantic addressing, which is a key component of the new IP proposal, looks into expanding the address space, not only include the version 4 or version 6 address, but new IDs to be added to the address space, including individual IDs, what is called people IDs, or service IDs for quality of service assurance between both ends, or content ID to identify the protocol and the content being sent between the sending and receiving entity. Of course, as well as the device ID and then the IP address. So significantly more information is being provided, is expected to be provided by this proposal about the participants and the information being sent. So really a foundation for mass surveillance that is being built into the new architecture that's aimed to replace the current IP and the current internet. On the deterministic forwarding side, here the aim is to provide delay guarantees and delay variation guarantees in the very stringent guarantees in the order of multiple microseconds, so fractions of milliseconds and multiple microseconds. So very stringent guarantees are expected by this proposal, and some analysis done by ITU Study Group 12, which looks at quality of service and performance issues of networks, have identified that such guarantees can only be delivered in a local or citywide network. If a distance on a regional or global basis, such guarantees can actually not be delivered. So what's being asked here is not realistic to be delivered by a global internet architecture. So the key concerns in this proposal are the lack of interoperability introduced by putting on the ground a new architecture that is not really interoperable with the existing architecture, new addressing scheme, complete new addressing scheme, which actually will lead to internet fragmentation. So this is an outcome that would be expected for introducing such a global architecture. And success of the internet has been based on innovation and standards that are really incremental. You base one innovation on top of the other, one success on top of the other. It's an evolutionary process, not a revolutionary process. Along with this line, capital investment in the hardware and the software in the network infrastructure provided by the operators, by national research education networks, by enterprise networks, will be actually at threat if such a migration takes place to a new protocol and a new architecture without due consideration for the investment protection. And the proposal tries to sell future technologies against current network architecture and services, which is really not really comparing apple to apple. And lack of deployment in networks is not really lack of capability, because the deployment of services is driven also by market demand and consumer demand, not only by technology and standard advancements. So some false claims have been made in this proposal, and they are articulated also in the next slide. the current networking environment is not only the internet. Internet is based on multiple heterogeneous networks interconnected together. Today's network cannot handle heterogeneous networks, which is sufficiently well-known false claim. Ultra-high throughput can be supported today for sure, given the high-definition services being deployed on the network today, with a huge amount of video conferencing services at high quality as we are doing now. The fact that low latency is required is not really on a global basis. It can be on a regional or local basis, but very low latency be required on a global basis is something that is not really realistic. These concerns were put forward by the European Telecommunication Network Operators Group, which is the alliance or group bringing together the European telecom operators. And they have raised their concerns directly to the chair of Study Group 13 when the decision was being made in December 2020 to stop or to advance this new proposal. And they articulated three major concerns: that high investment devoted to telecom networks and infrastructures should not be threatened by deployment of new internet protocol, as well as it is very critical to avoid duplication of efforts. There should be no overlap between what the ITU is doing versus what other SDOs and standard organizations are doing. Giving example, the IETF and the IEEE. And also the internet protocols and their success has been that they were developed in a multi-stakeholder environment that is open, available to all stakeholders, and bottom-up fashion, not such as the IETF and the IEEE, and not driven by top-down processes as in the ITU, which is a government-led decision-making body. Here I present two examples that happened in March 2021 in proposals after the decision to stop discussing new IP. And as you will see, the elements of new IP are presented in these proposals. So the first one is polymorphic networking, what's called PINet. And here, what is proposed is a new type of network architecture and potential network model for the future sixth-generation mobile communication network, using some buzzwords and keywords to attract attention. But the key point is that this proposal looks into addressing routing schemes, switching modes, interconnection modes, network element forms, transmission protocols that enable the network to support specialized and customized services, which means a new global architecture. And it became very clear once we looked into what kind of addressing scheme this network is supposed to use. By the way, this proposal is based on one paper published in a journal that really is very high level and does not provide any justification for such an approach. The addressing scheme I was referring to is shown here. It's shown that it's really a multi-semantic addressing scheme, very similar to the original new IP proposal, again requiring, in addition to the IP addresses in the header, identity ID, content ID, location ID, multiple information being gathered by the sending and receiving parties, which is really the foundation of our widespread institutional surveillance mechanism. Hence, the concerns here are that this proposal is a research topic, really. It's not, and it's far too early to seek international standardization. The proposal does not include sufficient information for the need of a new architecture or its potential use, or gap analysis with the work related being done at other SDOs. And such discussions of such proposal that we look into the architecture of the global internet should take place not at the ITU, but at other standards organizations, particularly the IETF. The second proposal looks into the other side, of the deterministic services, or in other words, immersive real-time communications. And here the proposal looks into how can real-time services such as heterogeneous homographic type communications or digital twins be incorporated into a future architecture, providing guarantees including ultra-high bandwidth, ultra-low latency, strict synchronization, very similar to what we have seen from the original new IP proposal. And the case studies in this scenarios, the two case studies presented are the digital twins, as well as the holographic type communication services. And these services, by the way, they are currently being delivered on the existing internet architecture. And the internet architecture today is scaling up to support such services. Nevertheless, this was the proposal coming again from China for a new global architecture that supports these use cases that we have seen for the new IP proposal, original and new IP proposal, and to become as a new standardization item for the ITUT study group 13. Here again, the key concerns were this is a research topic, is not really ready for international standardization, as well as insufficient information for why actually this work is needed, why a new architecture is needed, given that it can be supported today on existing internet. And whether the ITU is the place to discuss these versus other standards organizations like the IETF. Moving from these efforts, continued efforts and persistent efforts to bring in new kinds of evolutionary scenarios for the internet at the ITUT, not all evolution paths are really harmful to the internet. There are evolution paths which have proven over time to be very successful in expanding the internet and providing the permissionless innovation that the internet is based to. And one of these directions is the vertical or specialized networks, where really innovation takes place more on the edge of the network. And definition of the vertical or specialized networks is that they typically use protocols that are optimized for the deployment scenario, being manufacturing, architecture, agriculture, smart city, smart health, and the like. And the optimization here targets less overhead, i.e. higher data rate or throughput, and at the same time, higher speed. And these optimization typically take place at the physical layer of the network or at the data link layer of the network or the MAC layer of the network. And in order to achieve the efficiencies that is aimed for, these protocols avoid complex routing decisions. Because these routing decisions will require significant processing and relatively long headers in order, and this will really increase the complexity of the protocols and then reduce network throughput. So these networks will run being controlled either the physical layer or the MAC layer, and then one single point in the network will be the interface to the internet, and hence the incorporation of the IP header will be necessary. But the rest of the network will operate at a much lighter overhead and header structure. An example of this is what ETSI is currently working on for smart manufacturing domain. There's a non-IP networking group or ISG, industry specification group, that really looks into building some sort of protocol for a smart manufacturing site. And they came up with a protocol structure for this particular requirement, where you have large number of robots that need to be controlled in a very small time frame, between every 100 milliseconds, 1,000 or more robots being controlled. So a real-time interface is required. And here a protocol protocol proposal was put together at ETSI for this kind of specific scenario, smart manufacturing site called Flexi-Link network model. And here they propose a simplified header structure, as well as a flow or virtual circuit mode of transmission. So the connectionless environment becomes a connection-oriented environment between the switch and the controller, as well as the moving entities, the robots on the floor of the manufacturing site, with a simplified packet header structure, as I mentioned. So this protocol is optimized for this particular use, and only in this confined domain, a single domain environment. So no signaling protocol was specified, so it cannot be really replicated or expanded to a global or regional architecture. It is contained with this specialized network or local controlled network. Very welcomed innovation at the edge of the network for specialized application. Another specialized application is within the smart city or smart connectivity domain. LoRaWAN, I'm sure you is quite well known, but really an innovation in the wireless domain using spread spectrum technology allowed connectivity of multiple smart devices that have low power, the low throughput requirement. They call LoRa sensors to be connected to base stations, and then from there the gateway is connected potentially to the internet for routing decisions to reach the final destination. So another innovation on the smart connectivity, smart city domain that is again expands the edge of the network with multiple large number of smart devices connected to the controllers. The third and final example is CDNs, and the content distribution networks is really an evolution of the internet edge to allow the caching of content to be as close as possible to the end user, instead of being stored in a central location, have to traverse the network to reach the end user at the edge. So this is an evolution of the IP-based network that allows for higher throughput, better experience to be delivered to the end user. And it's an evolution path for the internet. For video services, this is an example on the right. It shows hierarchical CDNs to allow multiple caching levels to deliver high quality video services applications to the end user. Finally, just wanted to mention some very recent development that took place in this domain. So new IP is not something that happened in 2020 and we forget about it. It is a continued effort and persistent effort by the proponents of new IP to try to introduce new architectures for the global internet through the ITU-T in this case, potentially through other areas, but through ITU-T is where we see the threat coming from at this point. And these newer developments took place, for example, at the WTSA in March 2022. Here, there was a proposed resolution on cybersecurity, included reference to intrinsic security. As we have seen, this is one critical component of the new IP proposal. Because we're very critical that this term is not accepted in the final version. It was replaced by, for example, something called security by design, which is a more understandable, more confined term. Another resolution on standardization of non-radio aspects of international mobile telecommunications had multiple references for the focus group work on future networks, which means that future work should be based on the outcomes of this future group, which is really the direction of new IP. So it was very critical that this proposal is not accepted, and the final version of the resolution has all these kinds of references omitted, which we are able to successfully achieve at WTSA. At WTDC, which is the World Telecommunication Development Conference, had a proposal from China coming into a resolution that deals with deployment of IPv6, particularly in developing countries, and suddenly introduced a term called IPv6+, that was very vaguely defined, and wanted to have efforts done by the ITU for capacity building of deployment of IPv6 and v6+. And if you see that what the examples of what kind of protocols are under IPv6+, or what kind of technologies are under IPv6+, included deterministic services, included multiple addressing schemes, included use of AI, very open-ended, very loosely defined, that allows you to introduce anything, including a new architecture, into such a resolution. And this was really a big storm at the WTDC, and it was not accepted to be included in resolution 130. And all reference was only confined to IPv6 deployment and capacity building on IPv6. The last one I wanted to mention is something that happened actually just 48 hours ago on Monday. And here, another study group at the ITU, and a study group that deals with environmental aspects of telecommunication networks. And here a proposal coming again from China to creation of a new question, which means a new path for a new standard to be developed that looked into environmentally sustainable development and operation of ICT network. So the title is quite beyond and not really benign, and not really will catch any attention. But if you look into the details of the proposal, has this particular paragraph, which is very, very alarming. Study how the reduction of network layers and flatten the overall network architecture will achieve so and so. New network architecture solutions to replace the traditional 3-layer network topology, reducing the number of node devices. So basically, it's a completely new architecture of the global IP-based network. It is flattened, reduction of network layers, reduction of network nodes, coming up with new protocols. So basically, we are back to the framework that looks into some sort of a new IP to replace the existing global internet architecture. And this happened only 48 hours ago, and until now it is being debated. I presented intervention on behalf of the Internet Society at the plenary meeting of Study Group 5 on Monday, and we are in discussion. Hopefully this will not go, the aim is not to go through as an accepted question. But this shows that there is persistence in providing a venue to discuss and standardize a new global architecture for the internet, not only from future network side, but here from the environmental side. And environmental sustainability and climate change is something that we all care about, and we all want to achieve positive steps in this direction. But here, this particular paragraph shows you that the aim really, or the tool is here to completely redesign the global architecture of the internet, which is a very threatening approach. So it is important here. The key point here is important that we are aware of these developments happening at the ITUT, and ITUT is open not only to government delegates but also to sector members, and sector members can be private entities, telecom operators, vendors. It can be academia, research entities, and the sector members are allowed to submit contributions to discuss these and make presentations of these contributions. The only thing they're not allowed to do is to have a vote, like the government delegations have a vote to move or to stop a proposal from becoming a standard. So in summary, proposals like new IP, they pose a very significant threat to the global internet model and architecture. And although discussions of new IP were stopped at Study Group 11 and 13 in December 2020, as I mentioned, but there's a persistent desire, persistent effort by the proponents of this new architecture to submit other proposals that include elements of the new IP proposal to various study groups at ITUT. Not only Study Group 13 and 11, which deals with future networks or with signaling, that were original custodian of the new IP proposal, but to the security group, study group, to now and most recently to the environmental study group. And as you see, this is just ongoing and continuing, coming with very strong persistence to the ITUT. Hence, various vigilance, participation, being aware of these discussions and raising these points at different fora, including the forum of NANOG, where the large community of network engineers and experts participate, is important, so that the participation and engagement can be really increased. At the same time, innovation is key to the evolution of the internet, and we see innovation particularly in vertical networks that expand and evolve the edge of the internet is very useful to the evolution of the internet and very much welcome. And they are basically driven by demand and need, not by just an international standard that will imply and dictate a specific architecture to be deployed. Thank you so much. This is. I hope that this was clear and the key messages came through, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you so much.
Do we have any questions for Hussein?
Thank you for your talk, Andrew Dahl. My question is about whether the new IP and alternate identifiers ideas have been reduced to anything more than PowerPoint slides, as in, have any specifications actually been drafted, and or is there any code that people have started writing around these ideas?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. This question, actually, this is an excellent question. The proponents of the new IP framework have repeatedly claimed in conferences and in different fora, including side meetings at the IETF, that they have prototypes, working prototypes of this code and this switching architecture. So there is a claim that the proponents, for example, Huawei, have built prototypes and are ready for demonstration of these technologies. They have not been publicly seen as far as I know, but the claim is there and it's been documented in some research papers and publications. We need to keep in mind that China is a huge market on its own, so deployment can take place there without the rest of the world being aware of this taking place. And there is support for this direction coming from certain countries. That could also be a ground for initial deployment. So here again, awareness, vigilance, and participation in the discussion is quite critical to understand really the reality of what is being proposed. But I believe from my experience that it goes beyond just PowerPoint slides. Yes, there have not been standard specifications, but was stopped. The effort is still continuing and persistent to develop standard specifications. But the demo part has been ongoing, it seems, for quite some time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Well, thank you again for the present today. Thanks for your time today, Hussein. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.